Israel Update with Gadi Taub and Mike Duran.
Hello, happy Independence Day. You're tuning into Tablet's Israel Update. It's 220 days to the war. It's the 14th of May. It's a Tuesday, and in Israel, it's Independence Day. And I'm Gadi Taub in Tel Aviv. Mike Duran is in Washington. Hello, Mike.
Hi, I'm at the headquarters, Gadi.
I knew you would not ever miss a chance with that. So before we go to the news, Mike.
Not only am I at the headquarters, you know that there's an atmosphere of anticipation in the air here at the headquarters because you are going to be arriving in a week.
Oh,
and,
yes. I am.
You can cut the anticipation with a knife. So
That,
everyone is on tenterhooks.
But look back and you'll see.
I'm not even sure what a tenterhook is, but they're on it.
If you look back at our episodes, we're recording about 1 in 4 at Hudson for the last 2 or 3 months. Have you noticed?
A friend of mine who apparently I learned from this message he sent that he tunes in because he said Gadi is appearing too often at the headquarters.
I'm guessing this is one of your friends who is also asking, what happened to Gadi? He used to be a leftist.
No.
As one pundit in Haaretz once put it, Gadi Taub used to be an intellectual, but now he's on the right. And the amazing thing is that I've discovered since I moved to the right that there is actually mutual arrogance. On the left, everyone thinks on the right, everyone's stupid. But ever since I moved to the right, we look very condescendingly, at least at the Israeli left. And I'll have a story about that soon. But before we go to the news, I wanted to mention a good piece of news, which is very encouraging, actually. It's the Eurovision. And Eden Golan, who stood there in front of a booing crowd, unflinching, and gave an amazing performance. And not just that, Israel arrived at the 5th place. Now, this is deceiving because the Eurovision has a very strange way of.
She went, and by my tally, she got 2nd place and almost got 1st.
So, but the way they give points at the Eurovision is very strange. There are juries in every country who can give you from 1 to 12 points, and then there is the public vote. And the juries were skewed against Israel because they represent, the European elites. But the public overwhelmingly loved Eden, and she got 2nd place in the total amount of, public votes by country. But this is not the whole story, because she won the largest number of countries and the largest countries in Europe. So if you look at the general numbers, I'm not sure about all the calculation. I saw some, it's like, you need to be an engineer to understand everything that's going there. But apparently, according to major statisticians, the European public is for Israel. So all this picture you get in the media is completely skewed. These people understand that we are fighting at the forefront of civilization against barbarism, and they don't buy the whole media story of the so-called genocide that Israel is perpetrating in Gaza. Apparently, the least effective genocide in the history of the world, since the Palestinian population, I think, has multiplied 9-fold since this conflict began. Mike, let's go to the news, and then we have a very loaded program, a very, what's the term? What would you say? Amus.
Full.
We have a very amazing word. We have a very full program to you right after these messages from our news anchor at the headquarters of the Hudson Institute.
I will go to the news, but I just want to put an exclamation point behind everything you just said about Eden Golan. I mean, what a hero. She's 20 years old, and she's got thousands of people booing her. That's very hard. It's hard to take when I'm 61. It's hard to take when, I'm 62. I had a birthday last week. So I'm 62. It's hard to be booed when you're 62. But by then you already kind of know who you are and you know who the world is. When you're just starting out and her whole I mean, I don't know anything about her, but I'm assuming that she's been devoting her life to singing, and not, not preparing to do politics. And all of a sudden, you're at the center of this political storm. Very hard to keep your composure. So she really deserves a medal for that, I think.
Yeah, I think she had, she knew she was representing a mission and a cause, and she was in the right. If you don't, you can't stand against such a wild wave of hate from a crowd. Okay,
I had one criticism of her.
what?
Are we allowed to criticize her?
Only mildly.
I didn't like her fingernails. They bugged me all the time.
Oh,
But
shit.
she's a hero.
I'll take this out at the editing. I don't want this.
Okay. All right. All right. Here we go. Here we go to the news. So, look, the first item, of course, is that President Joe Biden said for the first time last Wednesday that he would halt shipments of American weapons to Israel if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu were to order a major invasion of Rafah. We don't need to go into any more detail here because this has been well reported. But we have to. You and I, Gotti, haven't spoken since that interview with Biden. So I want to put it out there so we can at least discuss it a little bit. Second item, I think I have 7 items here. Second item, Egyptian officials told the Wall Street Journal that Cairo is considering downgrading its diplomatic ties with Israel following a crisis in relations over Israel's Rafah operation. According to the officials, Israel gave Egypt a few hours notice, only a few hours notice before it began operating in Rafah, and took control of the border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. On Sunday, Cairo also announced Egypt's intention to join South Africa's petition against Israel at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. No, not Hague, The Hague, in The Hague. The third item, Israeli tanks have pushed into the built-up areas in eastern Rafah this morning. We're doing this on Tuesday morning. At the same time, Israel has concentrated enough forces on the outskirts of Rafah to carry out a full military attack on the city in the coming days, according to senior American officials who spoke to CNN. It's not clear, however, whether Israel has made the final decision to carry out such an attack, which, of course, would defy President Biden's prohibition. Fourth item, the United States has called on Iran to halt unprecedented weapons transfers to Yemen's Houthis for attacks on ships, including American ships. The United States called on Iran to stop that because it is enabling their fighters to carry out "quote unquote" reckless attacks. Gotti, that there's nothing the Houthis hate more than a stern letter. A stern letter from Washington really scares them. The fifth item, the Biden administration does not see it likely or possible that Israel will achieve total victory in defeating Hamas in the Palestinian enclave of Rafah. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell said this on Monday, quote, "In some respects, we are struggling over what the theory of victory is," Campbell said at a public event. Quote, "Sometimes when we listen closely to Israeli leaders, they talk about mostly the idea of a sweeping victory on the battlefield, total victory," he said. "I don't think we believe that it is likely or possible that this looks like a lot of situations that we found ourselves in after 9/11, where after civilian populations had been moved and lots of violence, the insurrection still continued." So, in other words, Gotti, I interpret this as don't do as we do, do as we say do. That's the Kurt Campbell position. Sixth, in a dramatic development, and this we can't talk about this enough, Gotti, in a dramatic development, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, that's the OCHA, has sharply revised the numbers of female and child fatalities in the war in Gaza. Revised them downward. The new figures reported by OCHA reduced by more than half the number of women and children that it previously said had been killed during the war. It previously reported that 9,500 women and 14,500 children had died. That's 69% of all fatalities. OCHA is now reporting far lower numbers, stating that 4,959 women have died, along with 7,797 children, or 52% of the numbers of the total numbers of the total deaths identified in the war. That's it, Gadi. The other item that I had on the news here is that you're going to be coming to the headquarters in a week, but I already mentioned that.
Yes, you did. I also want to say that we will be discussing your new piece, tablet, which is very important for Israel.
That should have been the number one issue on the news.
And
I have a piece in tablet which is called "The Gates of Gaza."
yes, and it is an analysis of what everybody here is asking, and no one is even attempting to answer seriously. What is the conceptia, the conception that failed? What is the central organizing idea that the IDF has been building itself around and has failed us so miserably? And it failed us on the morning of the 7th of October, and it fails us in the larger regional struggle against Iran. So seriously, Mike, all joking aside, this is extremely important. I got multiple messages saying that decision makers in Israel should read this piece urgently, and I'm going to help them with this as much as I can. I mean, I'm going to bother them on WhatsApp. So I want to.
I'm going to tweet at them.
Yeah, and then I'm going to tweet at the Houthis in case
they hate that. They hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, they start fidgeting the minute I even talk about it.
Yeah, the Houthis, they hate a strong letter, a stern letter from America. But what do they hate most of all? Sarcasm on Twitter. That's what. Can't stand it.
But before everything else, many people think that Joe Biden went one step too far, because what was happening with the Biden administration is people here don't understand that it's problematic for Israel, partly because of the press. The press portrays, the press is divided between manipulators who are just American agents and are fed by American handlers whom they call sources, and people who naively just think that everything American is amazing and America is our savior. And so so America plays to this, and Joe Biden just did it right before he announced that he would withhold shipments of arms. He made this Holocaust Memorial Day speech, which every Israeli heart would have been touched if they heard it, or if they haven't heard me or you about Joe Biden. But he says we will never forget. Some people forgot what happened on October 7th. I will not forget. And every code word for the Jewish collective memory was plugged into that speech. And now we know that Lloyd Austin probably misled Congress when he said that the decision wasn't made yet to hold back the shipment, because what they held back is announcing it so that Joe Biden can give his sentimental speech. But I think this time the spin didn't work, because up to now,
by the way, that was even reported, I believe, in the New York Times. If it wasn't the New York Times, it was the Wall Street Journal, because those are really the only things I read. And an official basically told them that they were holding it up because Biden wanted to deliver his Holocaust speech, which is so cynical.
Unbelievably cynical. You're turning your back on Israel at a time of mortal danger, and you're doing it in the aftermath of a never again speech. But they've been cynical from day one, and people in Israel, and that's my point, have been buying it. They've been buying the sentimental talk. I kept saying here on television, other places, I say Israelis listen to the music and they don't listen to the lyrics. They don't read the words. They just listen to this tone. And Joe Biden, I have to tell you, if he has one talent, it's faking this down home, I'm your buddy kind of talk. And then he comes here, he hugs a girl who has been freed from captivity, and he goes to talk to the families of the captives, and he makes all these gestures, and people turn a blind eye to the actual policy. But I think this time it didn't work in America. I'm not sure about Israel. In Israel, it worked. It didn't work on the right side of the feed. Definitely, people are waking up. I had a victory lap in studios because from his visit, I've been saying that that we can't trust him on these issues, but half the public still doesn't get it. Do you think things in the United States have turned a corner?
I do think they've changed. I think they've really overplayed their hand in a number of ways. I think that the demonstrations on the university campuses were a mistake. I feel
What do you
like
mean they were a mistake? They were not his decision. You mean his treatment of them was a mistake?
Oh, sorry. So look, there's an element of organization behind all this. And there is clear, I don't think the White House ordered it, but these demonstrations are a democratic political operation and are used by it. And there are lots of people in these demonstrations who are the usual left-wing rabble-rousing crowd that we saw in Black Lives Matter or
let me refer our listeners to another tablet piece called "The People Setting Fire to America," which traces the financing and the organizational arm. But that's the
Park McDougal piece.
Yeah,
that's the best single piece I've read on all this stuff.
But are you saying that this is directly in coordination with the White House? Or is that...
I don't know directly. Like, look, when we had the Black Lives Matter riots, were those directly coordinated? When there was, what was it, Occupy Wall Street, was that directly coordinated? There are these well-funded organizations that engage in these kind of political operations. And the organized left, I mean, the establishment left, benefits from them and pretends they don't exist. And you can see, if you look at what Biden's Justice Department, the steps that it took and didn't take with respect to the protests, they didn't listen to anyone saying that this was discrimination against Jews who were being blocked. You see that you had a Star of David on and you try to walk through on your campus where you're paying tuition, you're blocked because you're a Zionist, you're not allowed in. But these other people who are clearly not students, wearing masks, refusing to identify themselves, organizing the crowd, they're allowed in. So this was pretty well documented in Colombia. There were people there who were professional organizers. So I don't know. I don't want to say that the White House ordered it, but the White House decided not to go against it, not to make any statements about it of any kind of any serious way. And so it's the left. Is it the Democratic Party? I don't know, but it's the left. Yeah. And it reminds me of 1968. Not that I was really politically aware at the time. I was 6 years old, but I read a great book. I think Ron Perlstein, it's called. It's called Nixon Land. It's a great book about Nixon's re-election in Nixon's election in 68, and about how he uses all of the demonstrations going on all around the country in order to awaken the silent majority. Everyone who's sitting in their living room thinking you send the kids to college to actually hear different points of view and learn how to write and think it through, not to get indoctrinated by terrorist supporters. Yeah. So I think the average American, if I have any sense of what the average American thinks, and I think I do, they looked at that and they thought, this is not what college is about. This is not what we as a country are about. This is disgusting. And they the same thing with Biden's position on Israel. Most Americans are pro-Israel. So that's it's really it's very clear in all the polling. It's clear. You talk to Americans. Americans like Israel. Americans don't like terrorists. Americans think Israel was attacked by terrorists on October 7th and should defend itself against terrorists and should defeat them just the way we defeated terrorists in Mosul and Raqqa and in other places. So I think they've gone too far, and I think that the way is open for Donald Trump to follow the Nixon strategy and just point at all this craziness that's going on and saying that is not us. As Obama used to say, that's not who we are. This is not who we are. And I think that it's right. It's ripe. It's that's a fruit that's ripe for the picking. The question is, does Trump have the ability to reach the average person? He's got so many qualities that he sends off so much stray voltage. For example, on the Israel thing, the heads of Jews, American Jews, I assume, are just spinning right now. They're spinning. There's so many things happening in terms of Israel and anti-Semitism that they never expected to have happen. There's an opportunity for a good centrist Republican to reach out to them and say, hey, send a message to the Democrats, come vote for me. And what's Trump's message? Trump's message is, what Biden's doing on Israel is it's disgusting. I can't remember what word he used. It's disgusting. Any Jew who would voted for Joe Biden needs to have his head examined. That, like saying you were an idiot for voting for him. Come here, idiot, vote for me. That's not an effective message. So just refine it a little bit. And explain what's wrong with what Biden has been doing.
So here's my further question to you. Because what you're describing is I guess the surface feeling, which is understandable, and this is something that the evening news viewers, if there is such a thing anymore, the average social media browser understands and supports. But you have been talking about this for ages now. The Democratic administration is actually concealing its whole Middle East policy, which is the appeasement of Iran. Can this be leveraged to make American voters understand that this administration is going to set the Middle East on fire? Israel may not be able to survive another 4 years of appeasement backed by, or an Iran backed by or protected by the United States, and can the whole affair be leveraged in order to make Americans understand that problem?
I don't know about that. I don't know the degree to which the average American is going to see Iran. I can't get the average Middle East analyst here in Washington to agree that Iran is at the center of all of this. All of the Biden administration's explanations as to why it's trying to shut down the war in Gaza center around the humanitarian question, and people tend to buy, the misdirection. I think that they buy the surface explanation, and all the debate is constantly Palestinians, Israel, Palestinians, Israel, Palestinians, Israel. So I don't know. Tom Cotton gave a really excellent statement yesterday, Senator Tom Cotton, where he said Biden is objectively pro-Hamas and objectively pro-Iran. And he explained it very, very clearly. And I thought, well, I asked myself your question. I thought, you know what? That might cut through, because he explained it very, very clearly.
Let's listen to Tom Cotton then. I can splice the segment from the
do splice that in here. It's excellent. It's short, right to the point, beautiful.
Here it is.
It's now plain what we suspected all along. Joe Biden's de facto position is for a Hamas victory over Israel. Israel's goal is simple: rescue the hostages, including American hostages, and destroy Hamas, to get justice for the worst atrocity against Jews since World War II, and to prevent the next atrocity. Hamas's goal is also simple: survive. Hamas's leaders and its last 4 battalions are holed up in Rafah, so Israel has to defeat Hamas in Rafah to win. Hamas wins if it survives in Rafah. And Joe Biden has threatened to withhold weapons from Israel for fighting in Rafah. Therefore, Joe Biden objectively favors a Hamas victory over Israel. It's just that simple. And the president is only emboldening Hamas. Why would Hamas release hostages when Joe Biden will give Hamas exactly what it wants, survival without releasing hostages? He's also emboldening Iran. Here's what Joe Biden has done since October 7th. Sanctions for Israelis and an arms embargo on Israel. Sanctions relief and the end of an arms embargo on Iran.
Gotti, you know, I just realized I saw that clip on Twitter because you posted it, and with the translation from Elizabeth Rimini.
Yeah, and you know,
Rimini, Rimini.
Yeah, she did the whole press conference, and I put it on my on the channel of my Hebrew podcast, which usually gets 10,000 views, and it got 60,000 in the first 24 hours.
Wow.
I'm guessing it's going to compete with my interview with Netanyahu. I didn't even imagine this would be the case, but apparently the Israeli politicians and journalists are not saying the truth about Joe Biden to the Israeli public. And these 11 senators, or I don't remember how many, just say it plainly. And when you see there is a different America, you understand how the press is lying.
Tom Cotton is an especially effective communicator, I think. He has the ability to take relatively complex ideas and express them clearly, simply, and he has an understanding of the moral compass of the average person. That's the
and also, and so we can use this opportunity to also recommend his book, Only the Strong. A healthy dose of political common sense and buttressed with military experience. He had 2 tours of duty, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan. So he looks very young, but he's actually an experienced army commander and a very serious person. So Mike, let's talk about the army and the lessons of the army. You and your friend, last time I tried to pronounce his name, it sounded like he was Greek. So you and Con Kasapoulou.
Kasapoulou, that's right.
Okay, so Michael Duran and Con Kasapoulou wrote a piece.
John Kasapoulou.
John Kasapoulos?
Yeah, the C in the Kasapoulos, you mean Papadopoulos. You keep making him into a Greek. The C in Turkish is a J, so it's John Kasapoulou.
So why do you confuse English speakers on tablet? Anyway, the article tackles the conceptia. It explains the organizing idea, why it was wrong, why the Iranian strategy to defeat Israel will work if Israel doesn't wake up and understand what it is up against. And finally, it recommends what Israel should do after it wakes up. So let's divide this into 3 segments because I want our listeners to get a clear sense of the argument, then they can read the whole piece.
Oh, great. I didn't realize we were going to spend so much time on the article. I'm all in favor. The more we talk about my writing, the better.
Oh, take an hour or 2. Feel free. Yeah.
Okay. The key idea here is I think there's a couple of key phrases. One is military paradigm. So what we're arguing here is that the failure on October 7th was not simply an intelligence failure. It was a failure of the entire military paradigm. Israel had this idea of creating a small, smart military, and which would be highly reliant on high-tech solutions or high-tech answers to national security threats. It focused on their military paradigm, focused on use of the Air Force, special forces, and technology-centric intelligence in order to defeat Israel's foes. And that led to a whole series of, I think, posture and strategy, tactics that eventually had huge holes in it. And we saw those holes on October 7th. And the biggest evidence is that a terrorist army came across the border, and it was not met by another army on the other side. There were no large mechanized formations on the Israeli side to repulse the army. There were only small special operations forces, police, and so on. The heroes of the October 7th, the unsung heroes, are Yamam. But also, if you look at the numbers of Sayeret Matkal, these are
elite
special
SWAT
operations
units.
forces, elite.
Special
Yeah.
ops.
Sayeret Matkal and Shaldag, they took huge casualties on October 7th, because there's no large formations. And of course, in your crazy politicized world over there, the left is trying to say that, well, there were no forces because they were all holding the hands of the settlers on the West Bank. But that only begs the question: how come there weren't enough forces to hold the hands of this? I mean, even if it's true, let's give them that, right? If they're holding the hands of the settlers on the West Bank, how come there aren't enough to hold the hands of the settlers and the revelers at the Nova Music Festival? And the answer is there aren't, because they had this small, smart military, which they thought could overcome large numbers of enemies with technological solutions.
I spoke with General Gershon Cohen, who was an aluf, it's the second rank in the IDF, about this, and he said, yes, we had chiefs of staffs who come from Sayeret Matkal, who come from special ops, and they have no conception of macro army strategy. They only know surgical operations, and the author of the technological small army idea was Ehud Barak. General Ehud Barak, who is now the mastermind of the anti-Bibi protest.
I tried to stay out of all the politics of this in the article. I wanted to describe the big picture mistake. They planned for the wrong war. I also wanted to. I'm not a military analyst, a defense analyst. John Kasapoulou is. The sharpest arguments in this article come from him. I have to say. So I keep saying I. It's we, and Kasapoulou deserves the lion's share of the credit for any smart analysis of the defense side. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to point out that the Israelis didn't do this all on their own. Their mistake was an extreme variant of a mistake that had been made all across the Western world, with one exception. I'll come to that later. But all of the NATO armies except one adopted the same sort of idea, and they convinced themselves in the first 2 decades of this century that wars between states are a thing of the past. Basically, big wars, and they convinced themselves that technological superiority would deter the technologically disadvantaged. And now we see that, you see in Ukraine, you see in Gaza, this is wrong. The technological advantage, the technological changes that allow a kind of high-tech army also enable low-tech armies, so that there are new solutions for terrorists like Hamas or a country like Iran. There are new solutions that they have, new techniques, and new equipment, new weapons that allow them to take territory, deny territory, even to a technologically advanced country. And so what we're getting now, all wars in the 21st century are going to be big and bulky, expensive and long. They're not going to be short little. Episodes, short little. What do you call it? Exchanges of fire between special operations forces and terrorist gangs, which is what the Western militaries have been preparing for.
You have a brilliant metaphor in the piece, which is Mad Max versus Star Wars. So if Israel was preparing for a Star Wars, what we got is a wild ragtag band of terrorists using very smartly low-tech techniques, which we, with all our technology, had no answer for.
Right, it's a mix. The Mad Max metaphor. So Star Wars is, we can have the, you know, the eye in the sky, the eye in the sky intelligence that sees everything, reconnaissance and surveillance that sees everything, and we have algorithmic war fighting, and we have new sophisticated drones and all of this. And we can just sort of zap the enemy from above. The Mad Max metaphor said, and that's Star Wars. The Mad Max metaphor says that no, the new will not get rid of the old. There will be a blend of new and old, and so you'll have 1960s era Soviet tanks being spotted by drones that you can basically purchase from Walmart. And that's what we're seeing. Or from satellite imagery that you can buy commercially. So there's a mix. It's what's actually happening on the battlefield, that we actually live in a Mad Max world. We don't live in a Star Wars world. We live in a world where these two things are blended. As you see in Gaza, having an RPG and a tunnel makes you extremely difficult to suppress. We just had rocket fire out of Gaza to Sderot yesterday or the day before. We've had 7 months of war, and Israel has dealt huge blows to Hamas, and it can still send rockets to Sderot. That's not because the Israeli military is ineffective. That's because these new weapons are incredibly difficult to suppress. The only way you can suppress them is by taking territory. The only way you can take territory is with large mechanized formations. So wars are going to be big. They're going to be bulky, and they're going to be very expensive.
So that's the misconception. Now let's look at this from Iran's angle. Iran has a long-term plan to destroy Israel.
Yeah, Iran has an exhaustion strategy. It's trying to exhaust. There are two elements to it. One is exhaust Israel in a 7-front war, and the other part is to detach Israel from the United States. And of course, these goals are combined.
But before we go there, I just wanted to continue the same.
With the weaponry.
Yeah, because what they supposedly, we have showed great superiority when we intercepted almost all of Iran's attack on Israel. But what your article is saying is that they are using cheap weapons. They have a lot of them. And if we are going to rely only on high-tech defense, we don't have a chance against their offense dominant regime. Am I saying?
Yes, offense dominant regime. They have so we've talked about that here before. What is offense dominance? Offense dominance is you have a Kevlar vest. It costs $2,000. I have an old rusty pistol, but it still shoots. It's a revolver with 6 bullets in it. They cost $2 a piece. I empty my revolver into your vest. Your vest stops 5 of my 6 bullets. And that's better than the manufacturer says it will do, which is great. You have every reason to be thankful that you have such a good vest, and you can celebrate the successful interception rate of over 83%. You could do that, but you're dead because my 6th bullet killed you. And it cost me $12 to kill you. It cost you $2,000 to defend yourself, and in the end, you couldn't defend yourself. That's the situation that Israel is in right now with Iran. Iran is throwing all this stuff at Israel. Israel has these amazing defenses, amazing defenses, and it has this incredible interception rate. But in the long run, it's going to wear Israel down. As we discussed in the last, when there was the April 13th attack, the barrage by Iran, that cost Israel over $1 billion. Israel alone over $1 billion. The whole coalition, it cost them a lot more. We don't know what the whole coalition spent on that. I'm talking about the CENTCOM defensive coalition against against Iran, but the defense economics skew very much in favor of Iran.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, one of Iran's ballistic missiles, whether shot from Iran itself or from the Houthis or from the, Hezbollah, is going to get through, and it's going to do some massive damage. The percentages are against you in the long run, unless you can deter them from shooting. And the only way to deter them is by carrying out offensive actions. This is military science, and you know, Gadi, we're people who believe in science, right? We don't. We're not science deniers here at Israel Update. Right? Well, you're going to disagree?
I was going to say that it's not for nothing that you're at the headquarters.
I'm at the headquarters because I believe in science.
But
go ahead.
But your piece also suggests a course for Israel to take.
Hold on. Let me. I have to tell you what the science says, and then we can go to the course for Israel. The science says that you cannot counter an offense-dominant regime with purely defensive measures. You have to carry out offensive countermeasures. The only way I can deter you if you have that revolver and I have the Kevlar vest is if I have a revolver and I point it at you and I make you believe that if you shoot at me, I'm going to shoot back at you. And the problem here is that Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, doesn't really believe that the Israelis are going to shoot back at him because he knows the Israelis are being restrained by the United States. And that's I know you want to wait on the American, but I just want to say this is the last piece that's missing from all of the Star Wars analyses of how wonderful Israel did in this contest with Iran, is that Israel is totally dependent on the United States for its defenses, or nearly totally dependent. It has a huge dependency on the United States. Iran is dependent on no one for the building of its rockets, missiles, and drones.
So part of the problem is you had a great metaphor for that, I think, on Twitter someday. You said that the Americans are asking the Israelis to fight with a shield but without a sword. So,
right.
So an important part of the piece talks about Israel's economics and the fact that if Israel wants to have a freedom of action in its war with Iran, it must start manufacturing not high-tech toys, but rather just bullets and projectiles.
All the basic stuff. I think that's another term that John Casablo and I wanted to enter into the discourse, which is operational sovereignty. Iran, because it has its own defense industrial base that is completely for which it's not dependent on anyone, has operational sovereignty. Israel does not have operational sovereignty, and it doesn't make basic warfighting equipment for the kind of wars that are going to be common in the 21st century. We're talking about ammunition for artillery, and we're talking about interceptors for the Iron Dome. All of those, the interceptors that Israel has are manufactured in the United States. They're co-produced with the United States. But if the United States turns off the tap, Israel doesn't have basic interceptors, which it needs against Iran's rockets, missiles, and drones.
So Israel needs to change its manufacturing base of its security policy and its security economics, and it needs to also change what it manufactures in terms of. So it's not just going back to tanks; it's also erecting our own missile force, which
you're going to have to end the dependence on the United States,
and also end the dependence on the Air Force. Part of the high-tech conception relies heavily on the abilities of the Air Force, and the Air Force has changed considerably. There are no longer many dogfights. The last time I think Israeli pilots actually risked air battles was maybe 82, maybe even just 73. But there is a chance, if there is a barrage of rockets which will saturate our defenses, it is very likely that a lot of our Air Force bases would be paralyzed because the runways will be under constant repairs. So there are multiple dangers, and your piece says Israel is not waking up yet, but it's bound to, because it's going to feel the pressure of the danger.
I don't know that it's not waking up. I see it. I don't know to what extent what we wrote would be news to to a senior Israeli general. If they are having these thoughts, they're certainly not going to share them with anyone right now. So it's very hard to take a snapshot of the thinking at the moment. But I see this mainly as a predictive piece. The pressures, you can see the United States is withholding ammunition from Israel so that Hamas can win. That's happening before our eyes. That's no longer. You and I have been suggesting this, saying it, analyzing it for a few months. It's now fact, right? You can see this. Every Israeli can see it. Herzl Halevi, the chief of staff, whatever he thinks in his heart about Benjamin Netanyahu, he knows that the army he's got is not the army that he needs to fight what he's up against in Gaza. He knows that.
Yeah, although he keeps appointing people from the school that was just proven wrong. That's a completely other conversation. We're out of time. And so we are to the dumb mistake on the news. Why don't I go first?
Okay.
My dumb mistake on the news is, listen, there is a reporter now in Haaretz called Michael Hauser Tov. He used to be in Galei Tzahal, the army radio, which is also a very lefty outlet, ironically.
Is that a double-barreled name, Hauser Tov?
I don't know. He's son of Tzvi Hauser, who used to be a Netanyahu man and turned against him.
Yeah, I know Tzvi Hauser. I know Tzvi Hauser. I didn't know his son was. But where's the Tov come from?
I don't know. And it's also a wrong description. Tov is good in Hebrew. So he's now famous for having had a story that turned out to be completely false, that Netanyahu allegedly destroyed all the records when he passed the premiership to Naftali Bennett back after the election, that Naftali Bennett perpetrated his con on. And this turned out to be completely false. And he stuck to it, and he tried to manufacture evidence, and he tried to take out of context some recording that he did with one of Netanyahu's aides. It was ridiculous. But now he put out a tweet in which you see people from their backs heading somewhere into woods. And it says, many families are deserting the Memorial Day ceremony while Netanyahu is giving a speech, and you can see it's a con, because many of them have yarmulkes, kippot, and many are with women with headgears, and you see this is not the way that religious Zionists regularly behave. But then very quickly, someone found out that Netanyahu was giving a speech in a hall, indoors. and so technically this might be true. Netanyahu was giving a speech here while people were exiting the cemetery here, but there is no connection. And so, but this shows you how the press in Israel is relentless in its propagandist attempt to force on the Israeli public a rejection of the right-wing coalition, so much so that Channel 12 broadcasted between the Memorial Day and Independence Day. They're together, and they're together for a reason, of course, because we mourn the dead, but we also remember what they died for. And in the interim, the shift from Memorial Day to Independence Day is a ceremony in Har Herzl, the cemetery where the founding fathers are buried, and people are invited. A select group is invited to light. We discussed how to translate it, masuot, the beacon or the fire torches, and that's a great honor. And they honor you for something amazing that you did for your for your country. And so while this was broadcast with people like, Iris Chaim, you remember that woman? Iris
No.
is the mother of Yotam Chaim, who was one of the hostages who escaped.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And was accidentally shot by the IDF. We translated for our viewers a speech that she gave, and she said to the soldiers, "We hug you. We understand this is a mistake. Don't blame yourselves. These things happen in battles." And when you see this from a bereaved mother, it's just you can't your eyes don't stay dry. So she was lighting one of the beacons, and Channel 12 broadcast the anti-Bibi ceremony, which was called putting out the beacons, in which they put out fires for the people that they hate in politics.
Am I right?
Channel 12. This is the biggest channel in Israel.
Am I right? Like I was saying before about here in America, I think that those protesters at the protesters on the university and the indulgence that they received from the White House and from everyone else, really, it sat wrong with the American public. That's what you just described has got to sit wrong with the average Israeli. No, I'm not an average Israeli on the left.
I think you're right. This was disgusting, and also it portrays Channel 12, which is the most popular channel, in a very bad light. Why do you put this on a split screen, and as if these things both have equal
weight?
Yeah, it's a blinding metaphor. And someone on Twitter put a picture of Ben Gurion declaring independence, and on the other side of the split screen in candles, like they did Uganda. So if Channel 12 would have been broadcasting in Tashach in 1948, this is what they would broadcast.
But you got to explain the Uganda reference.
Uganda was the temporary alternative that Herzl, the founder of Zionism, imagined when he was desperate about not being able to receive a charter for the land of Israel. He said, instead, he had the Uganda plan, and the Uganda plan almost turned into a colossal split in the Zionist movement in its 6th Congress. So it's a sign of despair and disheartening and a disheartening option. And the woman who called, I think her name is Michal Agmon, on Twitter, who put it, was just it's brilliant. It's just brilliant. So over to your dumbest take. We're 7 minutes short of the hour. So
I can do this in 2 seconds. It's repetitive. My dumbest take is Tom Friedman again.
Mike, careful. We will end up thinking that you think Tom Friedman is dumb.
He's the gift that keeps on giving. He criticized Biden. He criticized Biden's prohibition on going into Rafah and withholding military aid to Israel. And his reason for criticizing it is incredibly stupid. I'm not saying he's stupid. Just this argument is stupid. Let me read it to you. So he says, I thought it was a mistake for Biden to speak publicly for the first time about one of the most serious departures in U.S. foreign policy, pausing the transfer of some 3,500 bombs to Israel. Pausing, right? Pausing. Word that was very carefully chosen. Pausing the transfer in an off-the-cuff exchange with CNN's Aaron Burnett at a campaign stop. So the mistake was not the pausing. The mistake was announcing it at a campaign stop. It left the impression that this was being done to satisfy the president's left-wing base that opposes the war, and Republicans and some American Jewish leaders immediately pounced on him for it. If the president of the United States is going to discuss publicly for the first time something as serious as even a limited holdup of arms transfers to Israel, he needs to do it in a well-thought-out speech that puts all of this in context for Americans at home, for Israelis, and for Israel's friends, and for Israel's enemies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then he goes on to explain how Biden should have explained it, right? And in other words, put words in the president's mouth. Why not say, he made it at a campaign stop because this is pandering to his left-wing base. And all the things that Tom Friedman says he wants, which is a new order in Gaza and so on, these are not going to happen because the administration is keeping Hamas in place. It's keeping Hamas in place. Tom Friedman, it's keeping Hamas in place. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Was I clear about that on that last point?
You were crystal clear about that too. And I think I miscalculated the time. So we're actually shorter of time, but we'll finish in a screech right before the hour. So thank you for being so patient with us. And next week, we will record our session at the headquarters. And Mike, there's also a Hebrew recording coming your way because you'll have to explain. Yes, you'll have to explain your article in Hebrew because we want Israelis to understand that too. So happy Independence Day. I'm persistent, not nudnik. So happy Independence Day for one and all, and we will see you next week.